Hi, I'm Steve Clemons. I'm Senior Fellow and founder of the American Strategy Program here at the New America Foundation, and I blog at the Washington Note. Hopefully some of you people are watching this online over the blog or the New America Foundation over the State Department's website, because we've got a lot of partners in today's program where we're going to be discussing diplomacy and social networks and really thinking about connectivity, particularly with regards to Pakistan, because we have a very special guest and some other commentators to share their thoughts about the importance of networks, radio, Twitter, Facebook, and what this all may mean in some tough neighborhoods in the world. We have with us Undersecretary Judith McHale. Judith is Undersecretary of Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs, had a very long, distinguished career at Discovery Channel, and she's been at the forefront of much of what we've heard of, from Secretary Clinton about talking about building out a real big public diplomacy and social network platform for the U.S. government that interacts with abroad, and that's part of the underlying theme today. We have Murtaza Solangi, Director General of Pakistan Broadcasting Corporation, sort of the NPR, if you will, of Pakistan, who's been a leading voice and force in free and fair press in Pakistan for many years, was one of the founding pioneer reporters and founders of Pakistan's largest English language newspaper. It's terrific to have him in town here with us. And then we have Alex Evans, who's, besides having a really cool British accent that I'm sure the U.S. government is putting to good use in areas of the world where it's tough for us, he's Senior Advisor to the Office of the Special Representative for Afghanistan and Pakistan at the Department of State. Of course, Richard Holbrooke used to head this division. Now Ambassador Mark Grossman does. Alex Evans is Senior Advisor there and an expert on the region. It's great to have all of you with us. Murtaza, thank you for joining us. Maybe you could start off the discussion today by giving some sense to us of what the state of your network, public broadcasting, and the state of fair and free civil society discourse and the media are in Pakistan.
I think Pakistan is one of those places in the world that offers diversity in more than one ways, not only in terms of social disparity, urban, rural, class division, but ethnically and culturally. Now, Pakistan Broadcasting Corporation broadcasts in 22 Pakistani languages.
Wow.
So the challenge is huge. The main challenge that we face at Pakistan Broadcasting Corporation or Radio Pakistan is to move with the speed of time. Now, with over 70% population under 30 years of age, more and more people switching towards new media and Facebook and Twitter and iPod and audio and video on demand, we just have a hard time to cope with that, changes. That's
Do you
the
have a Facebook page?
We do. Now, in last 2.5 years since I have been heading this organization, we have connected all our stations with SMS technology, since we have over 100 million mobile phones in the country in a population of 170 million. So it's a huge challenge. We redesigned our website, putting 14 channels live streaming and creating more interactivity, allowing people to call. You would be surprised that at Radio Pakistan or Pakistan Broadcasting Corporation, people were not allowed to call live on a radio network and express those opinions. So there's a sea change, but the challenge is even bigger.
Undersecretary McHale, in your job as essentially our nation's chief envoy, basically going out in this area of trying to open up new networks and to create, if you will, exchanges. I remember your predecessor, Jim Glassman, said we may not be able to make everyone in the world like us, but our challenge is to at least get them to talk about it and to choose to talk rather than to choose violence. But how do you see the growth of these networks and where the United States, say in the case of Pakistan, has made some progress where we're not yet quite where we should be? How do you see your role as our leading public diplomat?
I would probably agree. We're obviously operating in an incredibly competitive, explosive environment in terms of media choices and opportunities all over the world. And I would agree with Jim and his assessment. We're not trying to make everybody like us, but we have to find ways of communicating with them to an unprecedented degree. And it's not just talking at people, it's engaging with them, talking with them, having discussions, dialogues, and debates. And we believe that the more that we can do that, the better off we're going to be, and the way it will help us move forward towards all our goals and objectives. And I think that sort of two-way communication, that the importance of listening to people, of engaging with them, is critically, critically important. When you look today at what's happened because of the sort of proliferation of technology across, around the world at every level, people at every sector of society, deep into societies in unprecedented ways now have access to information. But they also have access to misinformation and disinformation, and all of us are struggling with this. And I think, I've talked to many of my counterparts in other governments, and we're all trying to wrestle with how this is, what's going on. And I think there are enormous challenges, but there are also incredible opportunities to use technology in very powerful and new and innovative ways. I think both President Obama and Secretary Clinton understand the importance of this, and it's a key part of our strategy as we go out. We were talking about Pakistan and what's going on there in the media environment, and I find it absolutely fascinating, the sort of proliferation of choices, and having a sort of wide array of voices out there in this public discourse and discussion.
That must make your job really tough, though. As I think here, we're talking to people online. They may be watching through Facebook or the State Department site, who knows. But that's a small sliver of the world out there.
That's right.
And people are making just multitudes of choices, and they're going to be in their different pockets. And you can take a frenetic approach and say, well, I'm going to try and reach and touch all of those. Or you can go with the sort of celebritized politician approach and get President Obama, who's got his own draw, and come in and do everything, but he can't. There's not enough time. But how do you deal with that, where essentially the complexity, that's so hard to get an economy of scale anymore, I think, in communications?
I think it's very difficult, but one of the things we start with is understanding the audiences we're trying to reach. We want to understand the markets. We want to understand the media. We talk a lot about social media, which is incredibly important and increasingly important. But the reality is, in today's world, the majority of people still get their information from radio and television. So you can't choose one over the other, and you have to figure out what is the appropriate media and the media mix for the message that you're trying to get. So it's understanding how are people getting their information? What are they listening to? What devices? Are they mobile devices, as they are increasingly around the world? If you look at Africa and the sort of great impact that mobile technology has had there. And then how do you design your messages and your engagement to really sort of be able to connect with the people you're trying to reach with? And a lot of it is listening to them and really engaging. Consumers now expect you to engage with them across a wide variety of issues, to listen to them, to sort of respond to what they want. And we're trying to figure out ways to do this, and it is enormously complicated. I mean, if you think about it, we're really in the business of trying to figure out how to engage with 6 billion people. No small task, but it is one of the things that if we can't figure out how to do that, I think that will make all of our ability to move forward to achieve our objectives that much more difficult. So it's complicated. I think you have to understand your targeted, the audiences that you're trying to reach, the messages you're trying to do, and then you have to come up with an appropriate mix which works in that particular environment.
So Alex, I got to ask you sort of a funny question. You're a British diplomat working in our government, and we can't walk away from the fact that the Pew research studies have shown that the popularity of the United States in Pakistan could use a little help. But is part of our tactic here to use a British accent in part to move us forward?
I hope not. I mean, I think temptation's always to use a different form of American accent, but I haven't quite mastered that yet.
Do that?
No, I'm still trying. I'm still trying. But I think there is something here about the death of intermediaries as well, and I think this picks up on what both of you were saying. But what we're trying to do here is facilitate lots of conversations between Pakistanis and Americans.
Can you give us some examples?
Well, I think against a backdrop where there's a lot of appetite to learn more about America in Pakistan. I used to live in Pakistan. I've spent time in most of the major cities in Pakistan. And young people in Pakistan in particular are really keen to understand American policy, American culture, American attitudes towards Islam. And there are often, I think, misconceptions, both in Pakistan about the US, but also in the US about Pakistan. And part of a challenge, I think, in all the communications activity and the programming is to find ways to narrate some of the truths about ordinary life in Pakistan, ordinary life in America, and explode some of the myths and conspiracy theories but get a little bit too much currency.
Do we have any kind of centers there? I mean, this is my own ignorance. I don't know. Do we have a center there where people can come in and learn or exchange ideas? You know, it occurred to me recently, I was in Hamburg, Germany, and giving a talk, and met an older generation of people who said that's where the American Center used to be, and we closed it because Europe is sort of done. Done in the sense that relations between transatlantic relations are great, but there was a period of time where you needed those centers in Europe, and they've subsequently closed. And it raised the question as part of our game plan to try and create these sort of centers, not just to necessarily propagandize about the United States, but at least create frameworks for mutual discussion that I think can go a long way in diffusing and neutralizing these conspiracy theories.
I think it's very difficult, and it's one of the, you're right, and I've heard the same thing when I've traveled around the world too. People were like, we miss the libraries, we wish we had that. And there were a number of reasons behind that decision. And we're actually revisiting it to see whether we can open them. And frankly, we're revisiting it in Pakistan to see there are 3 properties there that we're looking at to see if we can do that. But we want to develop something which is appropriate for the 21st century,
right.
Probably not the library that people remember from 30 or 40 or 50 years ago, but one which embodies technology and other things. We have a pilot project in Jakarta where we feel, and frankly it's located in a shopping mall, because what we're trying to do, we're trying to reach young people, and that's where they're hanging out. And so we've tried to sort of, we're looking at ways to do that, and we want to continue to do that. You asked about, are there examples of how we're doing it, because I think Alex makes a very good point. It's important, I believe, to expand the number of faces and voices and people who are in this discussion on both sides, in Pakistan and in the United States. And I'm heading out to California tomorrow, and on Thursday night I'm going to be sitting in on a conversation, a Skype-enabled conversation between students in California and students in Pakistan. And I've seen this done before with students, and you get high school students talking to high school students. And you begin to use, and we're using technology to do that. And these are students who are very comfortable with technology, so they can actually have a conversation and a dialogue and begin to learn about each other in different ways to sort of break down the stereotypes, where they realize that what they have in common is much greater than the things which divide us. And I think the more that we can do that, and here's where sort of connection technologies really come into play, where we can do that. So we're looking at a lot of ways to expand those kinds of connections. If you look at the demographics of Pakistan with such a young population, I think, frankly, the more that we can engage the young people in our country and the young people there, we're going to be all much better off. If I could wave my magic wand, I'd bring everybody from Pakistan here and everybody from here to Pakistan, and that would deal with a lot. We can't do that, and so we're trying to figure out how to.
There was a great, don't mean to interrupt, there was a great program, I don't know if the State Department is still doing it, but it would bring over young men and women from India, Pakistan, I think another of the South Asian, largely Muslim countries, and bring them over for a college experience. And they would go through, and I was regularly brought in to lecture at Washington College out on the Eastern Shore. And these students were amazing because they would have real ferocious debates among themselves about cultural questions, or women, or what was appropriate or not appropriate. But you could see their horizons changing in their own debates with each other. And then as they exchanged with American students that had a broad, and they all became Facebook addicts involved in, in Twitter. And I do think that they became nodes, multipliers, that they'll go back and then hopefully take part of that back with them. I really love these students, even though I found some of them completely obnoxious and just a completely different world. But that's part of part of the reality. But coming to that, Murtaza, when you look at your job in the radio sphere, and you're trying to your job is not necessarily to, I mean, your audience, as you said, is 70% of the population are young people. So maybe that is part of this. But part of the question is, how do you empower through your broadcasting people to think and to take what they're do you? I guess one of the questions I have: do celebrities build up in your networks? Do you have people that become inspiring by example because they hear them every day on the radio? I'm sort of interested in the ecosystem of radio drama, if you will. When you're playing your role as an important part of civil society, people are listening to you. Can you be more than just radio and talking about the news? Is there something larger and aspirational about that for the young people that are participating and listening?
Well, the main thing is to give confidence to people that it's not just a mouthpiece of government propaganda, because it used to be, and it still is, mainly funded by the government. The main thing is to allow people to freely participate and throw their ideas, whatever they are, to criticize government or opposition or anybody, any idea. That's, I think, is the inspiration recently, because we did not have this on the state radio before. And I hope it continues no matter what government takes over or what next Director General takes over. That remains in the memory.
It seems to me very brave. I mean, we've been reading a lot about the battles between some extremists in Pakistan that not only want to keep themselves walled off, but want to impose that on others. It's a hyper intolerance, and I know that this has had some political ramifications. So, is it tough to stick to what you're doing?
Well, we proved that in May 2009, when Pakistani armed forces launched a major operation in Swat and Malakand agency, where fanatics had started their radio stations, Mullah Fazlullah's radio station, and we had to give a counter narrative to the people in that area, and I think we did it quite successfully. Not only we did special programming and special music, we organized a lot of open concerts at a time when bombs and suicide explosions were taking place, not being afraid of what was going on and even raising funds. So I think we had a little bit a successful stint, and I think it needs to be replicated, it needs to be reviewed, and it needs a lot of more innovation.
Let me ask the three of you. We have our first question from the field. Question from Wisconsin. Can PAC Radio, which is, I guess, the short term for how you're on being
correct,
# PAC Radio, work with U.S. public media outlets to connect youth via technology, i.e. texting, Facebook, and Twitter? So I guess the interest is, can you be more than radio? Can you help serve as a broader platform in connecting young people there and young people here?
I think we are not only thinking on those lines, we already have connected our network and our websites with Facebook and Twitter. And I think there is a great need of cooperation between public broadcasters across the globe, including the one in US. I had the honor to work for an NPR affiliate when I was going to school, studying radio broadcasting in Wisconsin, Kenosha, Gateway Technical College.
Did you arrange this? Was this a ringer question?
No, I did not.
Great. Alex, any thoughts on that?
Well, just, I mean, I think the whole role of technology and of radio, it's also thinking about the ordinary heroism of people in Pakistan. I mean, I think it's easy to forget that the people who've been really on the front line over the last 3-4 years have been Pakistanis. It's mainly been Pakistanis, both civilians and military and police, who've been killed in suicide bombings in the insurgency. And you asked earlier, in a sense, are there celebrities? Are there big heroes who can speak to that? I think the far more interesting question is about the small heroes, the everyday voices in Pakistan. But our voices of moderation, they're voices that are very clearly against suicide bombing. I think they're voices that are skeptical sometimes about the US and US policy, but they're fundamentally friendly to a democratic, tolerant form of politics in Pakistan, which is in both the interests of Pakistan and the US.
I guess when the Swat Valley activities were going on, I don't know all the details, but Alec Ross told me, he says one of the amazing things is that you can communicate with many of these people because they all have phones and they have SMS. And I don't know if either of you know the story, but of what we did, but apparently there was a lot of effort put into trying to communicate with many of the displaced people and to create a communications network that we were part of. It was very impressive, and I never got the chance to invite Alex to come in and tell more of the story. But maybe you can share some of this, because I do think it bothers me, frankly, that despite the radio network you have not penetrating all aspects of Pakistan, and I hope that goes well, that somehow I get the feeling that in some of the roughest spots in Pakistan, they've got better cell phone coverage than I do in New York when I'm there. AT&T's working on it, I'm told. But do you know anything about that story?
Sure, absolutely. Actually, it came out of the SRAP office, and the team there, and Ashley Balmer, who I know you know, had the idea of really sort of looking at how could we meet this very urgent need that people had for information and take advantage of the existing infrastructure which was there, which was cell phones. And we used it in a number of ways to provide people with access for information. One of our thoughts was they needed to know where to go to get the services they need. So there were a lot of different ways that we could do it. And we've seen this around the world, not only in Pakistan, but in Haiti. You're finding at times of crisis what people, and actually you're seeing it right now in Japan after the earthquake there. The thing that people need almost first and foremost is access to critical information. How do they find people who are missing? How do they find access to medical information? And we also took it one step further, and we used it as mobile devices to, I think you've heard the Secretary talk about it as well, to raise funds, critically needed funding, where people could text in their support. So we used it in a variety of ways, and I think as we go forward, we see this as fulfilling a very critical need. You talked about the importance of developing a network and really getting people used to using social media and doing that. And so another thing that the SRAP team sort of led was the creation of Hamari Awaz, I believe it was,
yes,
which was launched with that very thought in mind, which was to create this network, to have people using their mobile phones for information, for texting, for a variety of things, and getting them comfortable with it, with the thought that once you have people used to this and familiarized with it and it becomes part of their lives, the applications are almost endless, that you can use it for messaging, you can provide critical information. Part of our strategic dialogue has been very much focused on communication and the centrality of it to people's lives, and how can we use a lot of these developments to improve people's access to services, which in the end has the ability to improve, their everyday lives. And at a time when they are sort of confronted with terrorism and extremism, again, we believe these communication tools will become very, very powerful resources to the people affected by that.
Okay, here's a question from Washington, D.C. Is discourse in civil society information enough? I guess it's our discourse in civil society information enough. What is the role of using media to build society? Not sure where that goes, but in the spirit of fairness.
Well, I think that you're seeing very important conversations take a place around the world where people are connecting, and I think this is the power of connection technologies. We've just seen it in the Middle East, where people are reaching out, they're connecting, they're finding their ability to build coalitions and networks to achieve pretty dramatic changes in their lives. And I think that media in every sense is going to be a central part of as we move forward, and again, a very powerful tool. There's a dark side to it, of course, which is it can be used against you, and I think we all have to be wary of that dimension to it. But I believe the power of these technologies to connect people, to move them forward, to achieve sort of certain goals that they have is enormously powerful, and you're going to continue to see that evolve over time.
I remember having a long conversation a couple of years ago with Richard Holbrook, and Richard and I were discussing networks and how important networks were, and then high trust networks versus high fear networks. And we just went on, and it got, I think pretty crazy by the end. But it does make one wonder that it seems like a race sometimes, that you get new technology out there, and the technology is sort of neutral and can be hijacked by various players. It can be used by governments to monitor people. It can be used by people to organize and try and outrun governments. And I sort of feel like we're in that pace right now. Where do you feel Pakistan is in this race, in this how it's using this neutrality. You've got an amazing network there that I think is promoting civil society and discourse and helping people to think. But do you worry about a dark side?
I don't worry too much about the dark side, because dark forces of history will always be there. But if you believe in the power of the people, ultimately they use those tools of technology to their advantage. And as I have seen throughout the history of Pakistan, media, how nascent it might be and how weak it might have been in the past, it has always provided a ray of hope and has empowered people. I have seen this just 3-4 years ago when General Musharraf pulled the plug on all TV channels, and there was a lot of censorship. They couldn't stop the flow of information. Cell phone text messaging was becoming a source of information. International networks, internet, they couldn't stop internet. And with this circumvention technologies popping up, I think ultimately people would use those technologies to empower them and repel the dark forces.
But I think this is where the government, the role of government, comes in as well. I mean, it's clear that civil society and the private sector, forces beyond government, are going to be much more important in shaping what happens inside societies. But I think government's role as a fair regulator of media and a sort of an arbiter of impartiality, and government's role in terms of the US-Pakistan relationship to actually make sure the government-to-government piece works, just as well as some of these technologies can connect citizens to citizens, both inside Pakistan and also between Pakistan and the US. And so I think there is a role for government there, linking into what the questioner asked.
That's great. We're getting a lot of questions now, which is great. One is from Twitter: would it be effective to put US officials on Pakistani radio airwaves beyond Voice of America?
We do. And first off, I think Voice of America and those groups do a great job, our international broadcasting, in doing that. But we do. We go well beyond that. And in fact, one of the things that we've been working on very consciously is to be sure that we have a broad array of American faces and voices speaking to the people of Pakistan, informing them what we're doing. I believe passionately the more we do that, the more we actually sort of communicate very directly with the people of Pakistan, the stronger our relationships are going to be. So we have very much, whenever our visiting officials are out there, whether it is obviously Secretary Clinton, I think you know when she went, appeared on a variety of Pakistan media outlets. All our high officials do, but frankly others who are going and who are engaged in the economic discussions that we're having, and so we very much are doing that.
Well, I would like to say, Murtaza, that I would like to have more Pakistani personalities here.
Yes.
We had, and they don't all have to be big shots like you. We had General Kayani on this stage, and I guess he was a big shot too. But I do think it's good to see a wide variety of people who come over. I think that's a great question. Another that we have here is the proliferation of new media in Pakistan is stunning. However, oral traditions persist. What thought have panelists given to strategic communication efforts in this kind of environment? Interesting. Alex, have you thought about this at all?
Well, we have thought about it, and one area where we thought about it is in Pakistan's tribal areas, where media reach is sometimes been at its lowest. But it's quite a difficult space to operate in, because you're talking there about the very basic form of peer-to-peer. It's about gossip networks. It's about the conversations that people have in their families or with their friends. But this is where influencers in communities are very important. So you may not necessarily have a huge number of people who watch TV or listen to the radio in some areas of Pakistan, but the role of people who do, or who can read a newspaper and then talk to their friends and so on, it is important. But Murtaza, what do you think that's true as well, this onward flow of information from people?
Yeah, there are multiple inputs. People congregate in a mosque, Friday prayers. It's a huge opportunity for people to gather and discuss ideas before and after the prayers. I remember growing up in a village where the morning newspaper would come in the evening, and in a shop they would ask me, "Oh, we'll offer you a cup of tea. Can you read this newspaper for us so we can know what's going on?" So there are a lot of all these things happening. Even in FATA areas, and rural areas, radio is still heard. People during the day listen to different public and private radio stations. At night, they listen to international radio stations like Radio China and Voice of America and BBC. So there are a lot of these inputs. And now, thanks to cell phones, news travels. The bulk SMS goes. Sometimes you get bad and negative news or incorrect information as well. But the carrier, the vehicle is there.
Let me ask you, just as we get ready to close, I take, just in terms of interviewing about these issues, I take them very seriously. I think that we, it's great, seriously in the sense that it is important to think what bets we place, what infrastructure we build. I was always so impressed with what SRAP was doing, for instance, in Afghanistan on agriculture, in Pakistan in outreach, and what some of the broader public diplomacy efforts have been of trying to wrestle and to give some meaning to what these new diplomatic possibilities out of these networks might look like. And we see a world that's very fluid. My worry is, it's just, we've seen a lot of action in the Middle East and Libya. I worry sometimes that the United States has a problem, where that if it doesn't act, it's blamed, and if it does act, it's blamed. And that the profile of the United States sometimes is overexposed, and sometimes it needs to work in partnership. What I find in networks like we have today, and I think President Obama and Hillary Clinton have been pushing on this, is that sometimes you need to let others go in the lead, and sometimes these networks allow that to happen. But I guess in a serious way, what do each of you think the most important thing that the United States and Pakistan could do to alter the chemistry of the relationship in a much more positive direction than I think the average person feels? And as I think that if we knew what the top 3 or 4 or 5 of those things were, they'd be well worth investing in, as opposed to a lot of the surface noise in other efforts. But I'd love to hear from you. I mean, all of you are experts in this area. I'd love to hear what you think are the most important things that we can do to change, to improve the climate dramatically.
I mean, from my perspective, the most important thing is a sense of honesty and trust in how both governments speak to each other and speak to the people in the United States and Pakistan. And that will actually do a great deal, I think, to improve the environment in which everybody is discussing the international politics of the region, but also domestic politics and tolerance in the region as well. I think also, on a personal note, a sense of humor helps. Pakistanis and Americans have a terrific sense of humor. And obviously, government officials aren't always known for their sense of humor, but I think recognizing that humor should be a part of that in private conversation, in some of the media, in trying to explain what the people of Michigan or Wisconsin feel as much as the people in Multan or Sialkot. I think that's important too.
Do you guys have a humorist in SRAP?
Alex.
I try not to be.
Resident humorist.
But it might be a good person. Invite John Stewart in for a briefing or something.
Who knows?
I agree with Alex, and I would add that you need to create more opportunities where governments and people, both at individual and institutional level, can engage themselves in a very transparent dialogue. There are misconceptions about US and Pakistan, and there are misconceptions about Pakistan and the US. So you need to hear a lot of Pakistani voices and engage in a very honest, candid, frank manner, pretty much Holbrook style. That helps. Investing in education, that helps, because more and more people are educated, they are empowered, and they reject wrong or fictitious ideas. They help themselves. So I found it very interesting when Secretary Clinton was there, and she engaged with a lot of TV anchors. She had a radio roundtable, and Holbrook, he loved radio. He would come to Radio Pakistan. He would have a lot of debates and discussions with radio journalists. You want the same thing. You want Pakistani public personalities and newsmakers to talk candidly to American audiences Yes, there are a lot of problems, but I think the way to address those problems is through a very honest and frank dialogue.
Thank you. Judith.
Well, I think probably in the understatement of the afternoon, it's complicated. It is an enormously complicated and challenging environment, and quite candidly, there isn't one answer and one thing that you can do to address it. I mean, because there are so many different factors at play, some of which we have no control over, and so it's very, very difficult and very challenging. Having said that, I think Alex alluded to the trust deficit, and we've got to find a way of closing the trust deficit. And I agree with you that I think the more open and honest conversations and discussions we can have, the better off we're going to be. The more information that we share about each other, the better off we're going to be. We talked about exchanges and the benefit of bringing people to the United States. Well, frankly, I always say to our visitors here, our country benefits by your being here because we learn about your country.
Right.
And the people in our country learn about, in a very real, tangible way they come to experience, and so that is critically important, and we've got to find ways to sort of do that. Part of it's through open dialogue and discussion and being very honest and transparent. Part of it is just learning more about each other as we go forward, and hopefully we are trying to do that. We're going to do that and continue to do that to address that deficit, and the more that we can do to sort of bring ourselves closer together, I think we'll hopefully be able to turn the corner.
If I were to answer the same question, I would say that building these higher trust networks, but also embracing this richness and diversity, because there is no cookie cutter American, there's no cookie cutter Pakistani, and so when you bring them together and you begin having these exchanges, I find them very valuable. I have learned a lot, and I'm grateful to those who've posed questions. I'm particularly grateful to a young lady who's not here on stage, Ashley Balmer, for suggesting this. I hope, Murtaza, you will come back many times. I've got a lot more questions for you, but I want to thank Undersecretary Judith McHale, Murtaza Solangi of Pakistan Broadcasting Corporation, and Alex Evans of SRAP in SRAP in the Department of State, which is located there, but I know represents all of these different agencies. But I think we ought to use your accent as much as possible. That's my humor for the day. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.